I still remember that moment vividly, when, amid the hum of a quiet evening at home, my wife casually announced she was leaving for an exciting life abroad. Those first 100 words, spoken as if they were just another line in a script, shattered my world. The air froze around me as the reality sunk in. The person I'd trusted, the partner I'd built dreams with, was choosing a distant adventure over our life together. In that heartbeat, I felt betrayed, invisible, and utterly alone. Yet even then, a fierce resolve began to stir within me. I spent the following days in a haze of disbelief and sorrow. My wife's decision, delivered with such nonchalance, left me questioning everything about our past. How could the life we'd built together, filled with shared routines, quiet promises, and plans for a future, collapse so effortlessly? I replayed our conversations, searching for hints that perhaps she had longed for something different, something beyond what our familiar world could offer. It wasn't just the pain of abandonment, it was the sting of realizing that I had been blind to the gaps that had been forming between us over time. In the solitude of my apartment, I began to gather the pieces of a life that now felt irreparably altered. I found myself wandering through rooms that echoed with memories, of laughter during long Sunday dinners, of secret glances exchanged over coffee, of promises made with unwavering belief. Yet as I looked around, everything felt distant and unreal. I could no longer deny the harsh truth. She had chosen an exciting life abroad, a world of endless possibilities and exotic adventures, leaving me behind in a reality that suddenly seemed smaller and less vibrant. With a heavy heart, I started to re-examine the relationship, searching for the subtle signs I might have missed. I recalled moments when she had seemed restless, when her eyes had drifted to the window during our evenings together as if longing for something unknown. I wondered if I had been so engrossed in providing stability that I had overlooked the yearning for freedom that had silently been growing in her. The realization was painful, yet it also ignited a spark within me. I resolved that I would not allow her departure to shatter my sense of self. Instead, I would use this heartbreak as a catalyst to rediscover who I was beyond the confines of our shared past. I threw myself into the daily grind with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. Mornings became a time for reflection and reinvention. Long runs through quiet streets, where the cool air and steady rhythm of my footsteps helped me process my pain. I returned to my old hobbies, reading books on self-improvement, writing down my thoughts in a journal, even experimenting in the kitchen to create something new. Each small act of reclaiming my time and space was an act of defiance against the narrative that had been forced upon me, a narrative of loss and inadequacy. At work, I began to channel my emotions into productivity. I had always prided myself on my dedication and creativity, but now I felt a need to push beyond my limits, to prove to myself that I was capable of more than the comfortable life I had known. I volunteered for challenging projects, took on responsibilities that stretched my abilities, and sought out opportunities to innovate. Every meeting, every successful presentation, became a personal victory over the idea that I wasn't enough. The long hours in the office and the adrenaline of turning challenges into triumphs slowly began to fill the void left by her departure. Concurrently, I started questioning the nature of our relationship. In the quiet aftermath of her announcement, I re-examined our history, every shared dream, every small compromise, and every moment when I had placed her happiness above my own. I realized that I had devoted so much of myself to a partnership that had gradually eroded my own sense of identity. That painful truth became a turning point. I began to understand that my self-worth was not tied to her choices, and that sometimes, loss can open up space for reinvention. It was time to rebuild not just my life but my very self, brick by brick, with every step a testament to my resilience. In those early weeks, I also reached out to trusted friends and family. I spoke to a few people who had known me before I lost myself in our shared routine, and their words, filled with encouragement and gentle reminders of my true potential, helped me see that I was more than the sum of my relationship. Their support reminded me that I still had dreams of my own, ambitions that had been overshadowed by the comfort of our togetherness. Slowly, their reassurance began to spark a glimmer of hope in my heart, a belief that my future was still bright, even if it would now be lived alone. With every passing day, I took deliberate steps to reclaim my financial independence and personal identity. I revisited old projects, restructured my goals, and began setting new ones that aligned with the person I aspired to be. I enrolled in courses to expand my skill set, attended seminars to network with like-minded professionals, and even explored new career opportunities that challenged me to think bigger. Each action was a quiet declaration that I was taking control of my destiny, that my life was mine to shape without the constraints of a failed relationship. In the midst of this transformation, I found solace in creativity. I started a blog, a digital diary where I poured out my raw, unfiltered thoughts about love, loss, and the journey toward self-discovery. The process of writing became a form of therapy, a way to organize my swirling emotions and to document the lessons I was learning along the way. I shared anecdotes about the little moments that, despite their initial pain, were slowly weaving together the tapestry of a new, vibrant self. The response from readers was unexpectedly warm. Strangers reached out, sharing their own stories of loss and recovery, and in that shared vulnerability, I discovered a sense of community that spanned far beyond the confines of my immediate circle. I also took time to re-engage with the world outside my own struggles. I joined local clubs and attended social gatherings, eager to rebuild a life of genuine connections and honest conversations. At one such event, a small, intimate dinner with friends, I found that the simple act of sharing my story in person was liberating. I laughed, I cried, and I realized that every tear shed had been a stepping stone toward a future where I was no longer defined by someone else's abandonment, but by the fullness of my own dreams and aspirations. This period of reinvention was not without its setbacks. There were days when the pain of her departure would surge unexpectedly. A stray comment, a familiar scent, or the echo of a memory would bring back the sting of rejection. In those moments, I'd feel a momentary lapse into self-doubt, as if the wounds were too deep to ever heal completely. But I learned to embrace those moments as part of my ongoing journey of growth. I acknowledged the hurt without letting it dominate my every thought, reminding myself that healing is a process, one that is often slow and sometimes painful but ultimately transformative. By the time I had settled into this new rhythm of life, I felt an emerging sense of freedom that was both exhilarating and humbling. I began to see that the void left by her departure was not an end, but an opportunity, a chance to explore who I was without the constraints of a relationship that no longer nourished my soul. I was learning to appreciate solitude, to find comfort in my own company, and to trust that my worth was inherent, unchangeable, and independent of anyone else's validation. As I looked back on those turbulent weeks, I began to appreciate the painful catalyst that had set me on this path. The cold words she had spoken that night, meant to diminish me, had instead sparked a transformation that was larger than I could have ever imagined. They had forced me to question my assumptions, to peel back layers of complacency, and to rebuild my identity from the ground up. And in doing so, I discovered strengths I never knew I had: resilience, courage, and an unwavering commitment to living life on my own terms. Every new milestone at work, every small victory in my personal journey, reinforced a simple truth: I was capable of redefining my future, of reclaiming my dreams, and of proving that the measure of a person's worth lies not in the opinions of others, but in the quiet determination to rise above adversity. I embraced this truth with each step I took, confident that the journey from heartbreak to self-empowerment was a path worth walking, no matter how rocky it might be. In the weeks after that shattering evening, my life transformed into a relentless pursuit of self-reclamation. Every morning, I forced myself to rise before dawn, lacing up my sneakers and hitting the empty streets as the city slept. The rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement was my meditation, a steady drumbeat that drowned out the bitter echoes of her departure. Each run became a vow, a promise that I would not let her call for an exciting life abroad define my own destiny. With every mile, I shed a little more of the pain and replaced it with a burning resolve to rebuild everything I thought I had lost. At home, my sanctuary of solitude transformed into a war room for my personal renaissance. I cleared off the clutter from my desk and gathered every scrap of old notebooks and business plans, the dreams I had once penned in hopeful ink. I spent endless nights under the dim glow of my desk lamp, rereading, revising, and reimagining my future. The shock of her betrayal had forced me to confront my vulnerabilities, and in that darkness, I discovered a fierce, untapped reservoir of creativity. Every idea I revisited was sharpened by the sting of rejection, every plan polished by a newfound determination. It was as if each setback had become a stepping stone, guiding me toward a future that I would build on my own terms. I reached out to the few trusted friends who had always believed in me, the ones who remembered the passionate, driven person I had been long before our lives became intertwined with compromise. Over cups of strong coffee in quiet, out-of-the-way cafes, we discussed everything from our shared dreams to the painful realities of my current predicament. Their encouraging words and genuine concerns served as a reminder that I was not defined solely by the loss of a relationship. They helped me see that my worth was intrinsic, not measured by someone else's fleeting desire for adventure. Their support lit a spark inside me, compelling me to invest even more in my personal growth and future prospects. In the professional sphere, I doubled down on my work with a fervor I'd never known before. I had always been committed and hardworking, but the sting of her departure ignited in me a drive to prove, not to her, not to the world, but to myself, that I was capable of building something extraordinary. I started taking on projects that stretched my limits, volunteering for tasks that demanded creativity and leadership. Late nights at the office became the proving ground for my renewed self, where every successful presentation and each nod of approval from colleagues was a small but significant victory over the memory of that bitter declaration. I immersed myself in advanced courses and attended seminars to enhance my skills, constantly seeking to transform every bit of energy into tangible progress. The work, though exhausting at times, filled me with a sense of purpose. Every spreadsheet, every strategic plan became a testament to my resilience, a quiet defiance against the notion that I was unworthy. The journey wasn't without its moments of solitude and introspection, though. There were days when the weight of her words would resurface unexpectedly, a comment from a stranger, a familiar melody on the radio, or even a fleeting glimpse of our past in a newspaper article. In those moments, I would retreat to the quiet of my apartment, sitting by the window as I watched the city lights flicker like distant memories. I'd open my journal and pour out the torrent of emotions, the anger, the sorrow, and eventually the budding hope that grew from the ashes of my pain. I learned to see that the scars of betrayal, though they might never fully vanish, could serve as powerful reminders of my ability to overcome and to rebuild. Each written word was a declaration. I was more than the sum of my losses, and I would forge a future defined by my own aspirations. As time passed, I began to engage more actively with the world beyond my inner struggles. I attended local networking events and business mixers, not to seek validation from the past but to connect with like-minded individuals who were also carving out their own paths in the face of adversity. In these gatherings, I found an unexpected sense of belonging. I met entrepreneurs who had faced their own share of betrayals and setbacks, people whose stories resonated deeply with mine. We exchanged experiences over shared laughter and reflective silences, and I began to see that the path to success was often paved with the very obstacles we once thought insurmountable. The more I listened, the more I realized that my journey was part of a much larger tapestry, a collective narrative of resilience that spanned far beyond my personal heartbreak. I also dedicated myself to broadening my horizons through education. I enrolled in courses on financial planning, entrepreneurship, and even creative writing, each subject offering a new lens through which to view my struggles and potential. The knowledge I gained was empowering. It provided me with the tools to not only rebuild my career but to understand that my life was a canvas awaiting the bold strokes of my own making. In study sessions that stretched late into the night, I found that every piece of new information reinforced my belief that I had the power to shape my destiny. I learned that success was not a stroke of luck bestowed upon a select few, but a product of relentless perseverance, continuous learning, and the willingness to adapt in the face of adversity. In these academic pursuits, I also discovered a creative outlet that helped me process the emotional turbulence. Writing became both a cathartic release and a source of inspiration. I began to blog about my journey, sharing candid insights and lessons learned from the painful process of rebuilding. The feedback from readers, people who found solace and motivation in my words, was overwhelming. It dawned on me that my story, however personal, had the power to resonate with others who were struggling to overcome their own betrayals and setbacks. This realization was transformative. It shifted my perspective from one of isolation to one of connection and purpose. I was no longer just fighting to regain what had been stolen from me, I was helping others see that even in the darkest moments, there was a path forward. Throughout this period, I maintained a rigorous schedule that balanced personal growth, professional advancement, and emotional healing. Mornings were for physical renewal, running, stretching, and sometimes meditating in the quiet light of dawn. Afternoons were dedicated to work, meetings, strategy sessions, and relentless problem-solving that honed my skills and built my business. Evenings were a time for introspection and creative expression, writing in my journal, reading, or engaging in lively conversations with friends who shared my commitment to growth. Each segment of my day was a deliberate step away from the past and toward a future that I was crafting with intention and grit. I can't say that every day was triumphant. There were setbacks, days when technical issues with our prototype forced us to backtrack, moments when investor meetings didn't go as planned, and nights when the pain of rejection crept back in with an almost physical force. But with each setback, I learned valuable lessons. I learned that failure was not the end but a stepping stone to greater understanding and that every rejection was a chance to refine my approach. I learned to persevere even when the odds were stacked against me, and I began to see that the challenges I faced were, in fact, the very things that were shaping me into a more resilient, capable individual. Gradually, as the pieces began to fall into place, I witnessed the tangible results of my relentless efforts. My business idea, once dismissed and pilfered away, was reimagined and revitalized into a product that was gaining traction in the market. Early adopters gave us glowing reviews, and interest from investors started to build steadily. Every positive outcome was a quiet victory, a personal milestone that affirmed my journey from despair to hope. The once overwhelming negativity that had threatened to consume me was now being replaced by the steady, bright light of progress. I also began to see changes in myself that extended far beyond professional success. I became more assertive in my decisions, more confident in my abilities, and more at peace with who I was becoming. The isolation that had once defined my existence was now interwoven with vibrant connections, friendships that were built on mutual respect and a shared passion for growth. I learned to trust in my own judgment, to value my contributions, and to see every challenge as an opportunity to innovate. In the quiet moments of reflection, I realized that the betrayal I had suffered was not a permanent scar, but a catalyst that propelled me toward an identity defined by strength and independence. This period of transformation, intense and unyielding, gradually coalesced into a vision for the future, a future that was mine to design without compromise. I began drafting new business strategies, outlining long-term goals, and even exploring additional markets where our revitalized product could make a significant impact. I established a clear roadmap for growth that was built on the principles of innovation, quality, and integrity, the very principles that I had once taken for granted in our shared dreams. Every step of the way, I reminded myself that I was not defined by the actions of others but by my own ability to adapt, overcome, and thrive. Through these months of relentless effort, I reached a point where I could finally see the fruits of my labor. Our revamped product was moving into the next phase of development, and the initial market response was overwhelmingly positive. I began to receive offers from investors intrigued by our progress, and the financial projections were steadily climbing. The once dismissed idea was now a beacon of promise and potential, a tangible testament to the power of resilience and the transformative effect of adversity. Every new contract, every nod of approval, further solidified my belief that I had reclaimed my worth and was on the path to creating a future filled with endless possibilities. That chilly morning, as the sun struggled to break through a gray, unyielding sky, I awoke to a silence that was both heavy and strangely liberating. I knew, with a clarity that only comes after enduring the deepest betrayals, that I had finally reached the end of one long, winding chapter, and the beginning of another. My wife had left me for an exciting life abroad, a life full of promises and glittering possibilities that had, in time, revealed themselves to be nothing more than empty illusions. Now, as I sit comfortably in my own reality, a reality I built with sweat, determination, and a quiet refusal to be defined by someone else's ambitions, I learn that she, too, is paying dearly for her choices. I see her on the news, her face a mask of regret and desperation, as she struggles in a foreign land where the bright promise of excitement has withered into isolation and financial ruin. And I realize, with a profound sense of bittersweet vindication, that every painful moment, every tear shed in solitude, has led me here, to a future defined by my own strength and a life where I finally reclaimed my worth. The journey to this point was anything but simple. After that devastating day when she left, I plunged into a period of raw self-reflection and reinvention that reshaped every part of my life. I began by questioning everything I had once held sacred: the foundations of our marriage, the dreams we'd built together, and even the very notion of what it meant to live a fulfilling life. I realized that while I had devoted myself entirely to our shared future, I had lost sight of who I was as an individual. The betrayal forced me to confront the reality that my identity was not bound to our relationship. It was something deep within me, waiting to be rediscovered. I started with the basics. Every morning before the world stirred, I laced up my sneakers and ran through quiet, empty streets. With every step, I left behind fragments of despair, replacing them with a determination that burned brighter than the chill in the air. Running became my meditation, an act of rebellion against the sorrow that had once threatened to overwhelm me. In those solitary hours, as the rhythm of my heartbeat harmonized with the pounding of my feet, I found a renewed sense of self. I recalled the dreams I once had, the ambitions I had shelved in the comfort of our routine, and slowly, I began to gather the courage to pursue them once again. At home, I transformed the small, cluttered space I once shared with my wife into a command center for my personal and professional rebirth. I organized every document, every notebook filled with the ideas I'd once jotted down in happier times. I meticulously planned my future, setting goals that were now entirely my own, goals that celebrated not a partnership that had faltered, but the untapped potential I had discovered within myself. I dove back into books on personal growth, investment strategies, and entrepreneurship. Every page I turned, every new concept I absorbed, became a stepping stone on the long road to reclaiming my financial independence and self-worth. Work became my crucible. I threw myself into projects with a ferocity I never knew I possessed. Every late-night conference call, every strategy session that stretched into the early hours of the morning, was a declaration. I was more than what she had deemed me, a disposable accessory in her quest for adventure. I sought challenges that pushed me beyond the comfortable confines of my old job description, and as I took on greater responsibilities, I began to feel a profound sense of pride in my capabilities. My colleagues started to notice a change in me. There was an unspoken confidence in the way I spoke, an undeniable clarity in my vision. I was no longer the man who had been defined by loss. I was a leader, a visionary determined to craft a future that was entirely my own. Even as my professional life soared, I refused to neglect the quiet, personal parts of my soul. I resumed old hobbies that had once brought me joy and took up new pursuits that sparked a creative fire within me. I picked up my guitar again, letting the familiar chords soothe the lingering ache in my heart. I enrolled in a photography class, capturing the delicate interplay of light and shadow in the city streets, each image a silent ode to the resilience of the human spirit. I even started a blog where I poured out my raw, unfiltered experiences. A digital diary that resonated with strangers who, like me, had been scarred by heartbreak and betrayal. The outpouring of supportive messages and shared stories from readers reinforced a simple truth: that our struggles, though painful, can forge us into beings of immense strength and empathy. Socially, I began to rebuild a network of genuine connections. I reconnected with old friends who remembered the man I was before my life was derailed, and I forged new relationships with people who valued authenticity over pretense. I attended intimate gatherings and small dinners where conversation flowed freely, and in those moments, I rediscovered the joy of simply being present. These relationships, built on mutual respect and shared vulnerability, filled the void that once seemed insurmountable. I learned that happiness is not found in the absence of pain, but in the ability to overcome it and to grow from every experience. As months turned into a year, the tide of my transformation began to turn decisively in my favor. I not only rebuilt my personal identity but also re-established a firm grasp on my financial future. I re-examined my investments, diversified my portfolio, and even started a small side venture that excited me. Every decision, every calculated risk, was a step away from the shadow of my past and a leap toward a future defined by my own ambition. I learned to relish the freedom that came from standing on my own, unburdened by the weight of someone else's choices. I was no longer the man who was left behind by an exciting life abroad. I was a man who had embraced solitude, discovered his own potential, and built a life that was rich in promise. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected message, a brief, almost apologetic note from my wife. She wrote that her exciting life abroad had not turned out as she had imagined. The message was terse, and it carried an undercurrent of regret that made my heart ache, yet I felt a quiet, bittersweet satisfaction. I realized then that while she had sought adventure and freedom, her choices had led her into a life of isolation and financial struggle, a stark contrast to the thriving, self-assured future I was now crafting. Her regret, I understood, was not my triumph but a somber reminder that the path of deceit and impulsive decisions often ends in solitude and sorrow. In that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and the loss of a shared future, yet I had emerged from the wreckage stronger and more resilient. Every hardship had been a lesson that my worth is not determined by the actions of others, but by my own ability to persevere and create. I understood that true empowerment comes from embracing your own potential, from learning to love yourself despite the wounds that life inflicts. I began to share my journey publicly at local meetups and conferences. I recounted the story of my wife's departure and the painful road to self-reclamation with raw honesty and humility. I spoke about the importance of investing in oneself, of finding strength in solitude, and of turning every setback into an opportunity for growth. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life came forward with their own stories of loss and redemption, and in their shared experiences, I found a deep sense of connection and purpose. It was in these interactions that I truly realized that my journey was not just about recovering from heartbreak, It was about inspiring others to reclaim their own lives, to build futures defined by hope and determination rather than by the failures of the past. As I look back now, standing on the brink of new opportunities and a future filled with promise, I see the scars of betrayal as marks of honor, testaments to the resilience that transformed me. The painful chapters of my past, once sources of deep despair, have been rewritten into a narrative of empowerment and self-discovery. My heart, though forever touched by loss, now beats with an unyielding rhythm of hope. I have learned that every ending, no matter how devastating, holds within it the seed of a new beginning. Now, as I prepare to step confidently into this brighter future, I carry with me the lessons of every moment of pain and every triumph that followed. I know that life will continue to present its challenges, and that the path ahead may not always be smooth. But I am no longer defined by my past or by the mistakes of others. I have built a future on the foundation of my own strength, guided by a vision that is uniquely mine. I have learned that true freedom comes not from escaping loneliness, but from embracing it, using the solitude to nurture the dreams that lie within. This is my story, a journey from heartbreak to self-empowerment, from betrayal to the unwavering pursuit of my own dreams. Every step along the way, I have transformed the pain of being abandoned into the fuel for my own resurgence. I now stand not as a man diminished by loss, but as one who has reclaimed his identity and forged a future filled with endless possibilities. And as I move forward, I do so with a heart full of gratitude, a spirit emboldened by the lessons of the past, and an unshakable belief that my destiny is mine to create, regardless of what anyone else may think.